Picture a Sunday dinner table. Candles. Roses. An old man celebrating his 80th birthday, surrounded by everyone he loves. His granddaughter near the far end, a slim folder in her lap, waiting for the one question she knows is coming. That question has been asked at every family table for 4 years. And for 4 years, her mother steered the conversation away from it fast and smooth, the way you grab a dropped scalpel before anyone sees it fall. Tonight, nobody grabs it in time. My name is Grace Anderson. At 31, I was working 3 jobs and rationing gas money the week I found out my grandfather had been sending me $7,000 a month for almost 4 years. I never saw a single dollar of it. I was an ER nurse pulling 12-hour night shifts, picking up weekend agency work, and teaching a CNA certification class on the side. I still counted quarters before payday. I still sat in my car after shifts doing gas math, not patient math, figuring out whether I had enough fuel to make it across town to the class I was teaching at 8 in the morning. I'd been drowning so quietly for so long that nobody at that dinner table ever thought I'd look up. So when my grandfather smiled at his own birthday party and asked how his check was treating me, I almost choked on the answer. Because the answer was, I had no idea what check he was talking about. What my mother did with that money was a betrayal. What she signed my name to in order to keep it coming was a crime. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we tell quiet stories about ordinary women who stop apologizing and start setting the record straight, one document at a time. No shouting, no fireworks. Just the slow, satisfying click of the truth locking into place. If a calm voice and an earned reckoning are your thing, drop a comment and subscribe. Because this one earns it. The night this story really starts, I clocked out of the emergency room at 3 in the morning and sat in my car doing math. A quarter tank of gas. A class to teach across town at 8. Cold noodles on the dashboard. I didn't feel sorry for myself, because feeling sorry for yourself burns calories you can't spare. 2 hours earlier, I'd run a code on a man whose heart stopped in a grocery store. My hands were steady the whole time. That was the thing people never understood about me. I was good at staying calm when every monitor in the room was screaming. I just couldn't make the numbers in my own life add up. I'd taken out the student loans myself. Paid them myself. Never asked a soul for help. Somewhere along the way, I'd built a wall around the word help, brick by brick, shift by shift, until I couldn't have asked even if I'd wanted to. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Sunday dinner. Grandpa's coming. I read it twice and felt my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't name. He was the gentlest man I knew. Seeing him should have been the highlight of my month. But something low and cold turned over in me, the way it does in the ER when a patient's numbers look fine but your gut says they aren't. I started the car. I told myself it was just the gas gauge. It wasn't the gas gauge. Sunday dinner was at my mother's house. The one my father had built before he died. My sister Sloane arrived glowing from Cabo, a new bag on her shoulder that cost more than my car payment. Her husband Trent talked about his investments with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a dime, though I'd later learn the only thing he was genuinely skilled at was investing other people's money. My mother looked me up and down in my scrubs and sighed. You always have to make yourself look so hard done by. I let it go. Letting things go was a muscle I'd overdeveloped. Then my grandfather walked in. 80 years old and still standing like a man who'd spent his life pouring concrete, which he had, before he built a company out of it. He crossed the room straight to me and hugged me so hard my spine cracked. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining with some private, satisfied pride I couldn't place. You're taking such good care of yourself, he said, just to me. It puts my mind at ease. I laughed, confused. I was a woman who reheated gas station coffee to save $4. Whatever was easing his mind, it wasn't my life. Before I could ask what he meant, Sloane called everyone to the table, and my mother's hand landed on his arm, steering him away with practiced warmth. I filed the moment under nothing. I was wrong. We were halfway through the roast when my grandfather set down his fork and asked the question that would crack everything open. How's that check treating you, sweetheart? I thought he meant my paycheck. I'm getting by, I said. Hospital pays what it pays. Across the table, My mother set her water glass down a beat too hard and pivoted toward Sloane's latest wedding client. Fast. The way you'd redirect someone from a topic before it could land. I noticed it the way you notice a rhythm change on a monitor. Small, specific, impossible to unsee. I kept the card you sent last month, my grandfather added, smiling. Stuck it right on the fridge. Best handwriting in the family. I sat completely still. I had not sent him a card. Not last month. Not ever. Before I could say so, my mother stood up and pulled him toward the den, her voice bright and loud. The moment closed like a door. I drove home in silence, that one line looping in my head. Which check? What card? I told myself I was just tired. I'd been telling myself I was tired for 4 years. The next morning, the mail told me I wasn't tired. I was robbed. A thick envelope from an accounting firm I'd never heard of, referencing in dry tax language the annual gifts to Grace Anderson, made on behalf of Mr. Walter Hale. Gifts. To me. With a number inside that made me sit down on my kitchen floor. $84,000 in the last year alone. I'm a nurse. I read charts for a living. The letter was not ambiguous. Someone had been gifting me on paper 3 times what I earned breaking my body in an emergency room, and I had never seen a cent of it. My first instinct wasn't to cry. It was to verify. I pulled up 4 years of bank statements on my phone, line by line, the way I'd scan a medication list for a dangerous interaction. Nothing. No deposits like that. Not once. Not partial. Whatever my grandfather thought he was sending me had been landing somewhere that was not my account. I called my mother that night, keeping my voice easy. Has Grandpa ever sent anything to me through you? A pause. Half a second too long. Honey, you're working yourself stupid, she said softly. Go to bed. I hung up and stared at the letter on my floor. I had just been gaslit gently, expertly, in under a minute by the woman who raised me. So I started keeping the envelopes. The next evening I stood in front of 12 CNA students, teaching them to take a manual blood pressure. My hands did the demonstration while my mind worked the numbers. Count before you react. First thing my father ever taught me, back when I was a kid trailing him around his job sites. He died when I was 24. After the funeral, my mother handled everything, the paperwork, the accounts, the survivor forms. I was wrecked and grateful. I signed whatever she put in front of me without reading a single page. I trusted the strongest grief in the room to be the most honest one. If you've ever been the steady one, the person nobody worries about, you already understand how invisible that makes you. I handled everything in my life except the one question I should have asked years ago. And sitting in that empty classroom, I finally let myself think the thought I'd been outrunning. My mother handled the paperwork after Dad died. My mother handled Grandpa's gifts. My mother handled everything. And I had never once checked her work. A week later, my mother asked me to come help clear out the spare room. I said yes, partly because saying yes was another overdeveloped muscle, and partly because I wanted inside that house. While she made coffee, I sat at her desk. Her laptop was open to her banking. And I did something I'm not proud of and would absolutely do again. I scrolled. There they were. $7,000 deposited on the first of every month. And right beneath each one, within a day, an outgoing transfer of the same amount to an account ending in the same 4 digits. For years deep. I photographed the screen. Steady hands, the gift of the job. Those 4 digits snagged on something. Months back, when Sloane handed me a check while splitting the cost of Grandpa's Christmas gift, I glanced at the number. Same 4 digits. The money came into my mother and went straight out to my sister. I felt the floor drop open. But I also understood right then that a photo of my mother's screen proved almost nothing. It wasn't my account. Every link in the chain belonged to someone else's bank, someone else's signature. Suspicion isn't proof. A nurse can be certain a patient is septic and still need the labs before anyone will move. I closed the laptop just as my sister's voice cut across the room. What exactly are you doing on Mom's computer, Grace? Ice. Pure ice. I smiled and said I was helping. I had learned my calm from monitors that scream. I didn't yell. And everything that came after depended on that. I drove home and built a file. Dates, amounts, the letter, the photo. I laid it out the way I'd chart a patient someone had been quietly mismanaging for years, which, it turned out, was exactly what I was. And looking at it cold on my kitchen table, I understood the wall. I could see the crime. I couldn't touch the proof. I needed someone who understood how the law actually moved money. I made an appointment at a free legal aid clinic, waited 6 weeks, and would rather do that than ask my own mother for the truth one more time. That tells you everything about how far gone the trust already was. Dana Whitfield had a cramped office, a wall of binders, and the unhurried patience of someone who'd watched a lot of families eat each other. She listened without once suggesting I was overreacting. If somebody signed your name on the back of those checks and deposited them into an account that wasn't yours, she said, that's a forged endorsement. The fraud lives on the back. So I pull the backs and I've got them, I said. She shook her head slowly. You're not the account holder. Only your grandfather or law enforcement can make that bank produce the images. So I need him to believe me before I have the proof that would make him believe me. That's the trap they built. His trust in your mother is the lock. Then she added the part that changed the temperature of the whole room. If your name was signed by someone else's hand to take your money in Ohio, that can rise to forgery. That's criminal. Before I went around my mother, I gave her one chance. I stopped by on a weeknight. Mom, is there anything you want to tell me about Grandpa's money? I watched her decide. You don't steal from family, Grace, she said, flat and certain, the way someone says a line they've rehearsed. You borrow. There it was. Confessed and defended in the same breath. And when do you pay borrowed money back? She looked at me like I was being cruel. When I can. Your grandfather has more than he'll ever spend, and you've always been the strong one. Sloan needed it. The house needed it. Then, almost to herself, he always did love a nice thank you note. My whole body went still. The card on his fridge. The best handwriting in the family. She hadn't just taken the money. She'd been writing to him as me year after year in my name to keep him grateful and quiet. That was a different kind of crime. And I was starting to understand I'd only seen the top of it. Dana connected me with a forensic accountant named Russ. He ran a lifestyle analysis and found that Sloan's wedding business had been bleeding money for 3 years, vendors unpaid, a tax lien filed, and then mysteriously satisfied. My mother's house had been one missed payment from foreclosure, and then somehow it wasn't. Both holes, Russ said, lined up almost perfectly in size and timing with money flowing in from somewhere off the books. I can show the money landed in their lives, he told me. What I can't do is put a name on the hand that signed the back of those checks. For that, you need the man who wrote them. Always the same wall. Always my grandfather standing on the far side of my mother. I had 4 weeks until the party. Getting to him turned out to be its own small war. Every time I called his house, my mother answered. He's resting. He's out with friends. I'll have him call you back. He never called back. So I did the thing she wouldn't expect. I wrote him a real card in my own real handwriting, drove to his house, and put it in his mailbox while her car wasn't in the driveway. Coffee. Just you and me. No one else. There's something I need to ask you in person, and I need you to hear it from me. Then I waited. 3 days of silence. I worked my shifts, taught my class, jumped every time my phone lit up. On the 3rd night, an unknown number called. I almost let it go to voicemail. Gracie. My grandfather's voice. Low and careful. I'm at Earl's house. I got your card. A pause, and then something I'd never heard from him before, an old man's hurt trying to stay steady. You want to see me without your mother there? I need you to tell me why. Because lately I've been getting the feeling something in this family isn't right, and nobody will look me in the eye and say it. We met at a diner Earl owned. A back booth. Just the 2 of us. And I did the hardest thing I'd done since my father's funeral. I told him the truth. Then I laid one piece of paper on the table between the coffee cups. A copy of a canceled check, one he had written himself. The front read in his own steady hand, paid to the order of Grace Anderson. $7,000. I watched him recognize his own writing and smile, just for a second. The way you smile at a photograph of someone you love. Turn it over, Grandpa. He turned it over. On the back was my name signed in a looping, confident hand that was not mine and never had been. Deposited into an account I had never owned. His thumb moved slowly over the forged signature, like he could feel that something was wrong. "That's not your writing," he said. Not a question. "No," I said. "I've never seen $1 of this. For years." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, worn card, the kind a person keeps because it means the world to them. He set it next to the check. The handwriting on the card matched the back of the check exactly. Loop for loop. "You sent me this," he said quietly. "For my last birthday. I carry it everywhere." "I didn't, Grandpa. I didn't even know you were giving me anything to thank you for." And I watched 4 years of a lie rearrange itself behind his eyes. He wanted to drive to my mother's house that night and have it out. His hands were flat on the table and his jaw was set, and I saw the man who'd built a company by refusing to back down. I put my hand over his. "Not like that. If you confront her tonight alone, you know what happens. She cries. She explains. You're a man who loves his daughter. And by morning, she's talked you back out of believing your own eyes." He didn't argue. So I gave him a plan instead of a tantrum. And I want to be clear about this. I didn't ask him to rescue me. I asked him to hand me the one tool only he could reach. "You wrote the checks. That means only you can authorize the bank to release the endorsement images for all 4 years." He nodded slowly, following. "And then we do it once," I said, "in front of everyone at your party. Where she can't pull you into the den and rewrite what just happened. Where 30 people see the back of the check at the same time." He was quiet for a long moment. "Your grandfather made everything he has by never once being afraid of the truth, even when it cost him." His voice caught. "Don't let me be afraid of it now. Even if it's my own daughter." We shook on it across the table. An 80-year-old man and his granddaughter. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. The request went out on Dana's letterhead, signed by my grandfather. Then came the part nobody tells you about, the waiting. I went back to work. I texted Sloan about the flowers like a sister who suspected nothing. My mother called to remind me to dress nicely for once. I said I would. There's a moment in nursing when you stop reacting and start documenting, because the chart is the thing that protects the patient when the shouting starts and memories get convenient. That's exactly where I was. Calm on the outside. Building a record that no amount of crying could argue with. If you've ever had to be the steady one while everyone around you rewrote what really happened, you know the kind of patience that takes. It's the loneliest patience there is. 10 days before the party, my phone rang during a break. Dana's voice had changed. "The images came back, Grace. All 4 years of them." A pause. "Sit down before I send these over. It's worse than the money." I sat in a supply closet under fluorescent light and opened the file. Check after check, my grandfather's handwriting on the front, my name forged on the back, each one deposited by mobile capture into the joint account my sister held with her husband. Trent had set up the deposits. Sloan had signed my name. It was clean, complete, and damning. And it would have been enough. But there was more. Among the accounting firm's correspondence file were letters the family had sent over the years, requests, updates, thank yous, and several of them were written as me, in that same forging hand. One, dated 2 years back, asked my grandfather in my voice whether he might increase the monthly help from $5,000 to $7,000, because the letter said Grace wanted to go back for her nurse practitioner certification and tuition was steep. I had never written those words. I had never asked that man for $1. Someone had used my name and my grandfather's love for me to negotiate a raise on a theft. You can argue that taking money was a family misunderstanding. You cannot argue your way out of signing someone else's name to ask for more of it. That signature, repeated, escalating, was the difference between a family fight and a felony. And it was all on paper now, with my grandfather's authorization on top. The night before the party, I almost talked myself out of all of it. I called Renee, the charge nurse who trained me, the closest thing I had to someone in my corner with nothing to lose. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet. Then, burnout isn't a badge, Grace. Neither is silence. I told her I was scared. Not of Sloan or my mother, but of becoming the thing they'd surely call me. The one who blew up the family. The ungrateful daughter who chose money over blood at an old man's party. What if I'm the one who breaks us? Honey, Renee said. They broke it 4 years ago. You're not breaking the family. You're just turning on the lights. I sat with that. She was right. I hadn't forged a single signature. I hadn't taken $1. I hadn't lied to an old man about a granddaughter who loved him. All I was going to do was put the truth on a table in front of the people who needed to see it. That wasn't destruction. That was a light switch. I drove home and slept. Actually slept, for the first time in weeks. The afternoon of the party, I came early to set the flowers, and I found my mother alone at her kitchen table. She didn't hear me come in. She was sitting with a stack of bills spread in front of her, foreclosure language visible at the top of one, her reading glasses pushed up into hair that had gone grayer than I'd let myself notice. She looked tired in a way that went past one bad night. And for one breath, I saw her not as the architect of 4 stolen years, but as my mother, drowning in her own way. The part of me that had spent my whole life forgiving her surged up hard. She looked up and didn't bother to hide the bills. "You don't know what it's like," she said quietly. "To stand to lose the house your husband built with his own hands." For 1 second, I almost folded. Almost said it could wait. That we'd find another way. Then I remembered counting quarters in my car for gas, while she kept her house with my money. For years of birthdays where she'd warned me not to make it about myself. A thank you note I never wrote in my name, asking for more. Her desperation was real. It still wasn't a defense. "I know what it's like to lose things, Mom," I said. "I've been losing them quietly for 4 years. And I went to arrange the flowers. Hand steady. Heart a closed fist. An hour before the guests arrived, my grandfather and I ran through the plan. He'd invited his longtime attorney, Holloway, a careful and precise man, as a dinner guest. Someone in the room who understood what we were looking at and could say so out loud if it came to that. I'd taken Dana's advice. 3 checks. Clean examples. The forgery unmistakable, but the presentation measured. Not so much it looked like an ambush. I didn't bring everything, I told him. I brought enough. He looked at the slim folder, then at me, and something proud and heartbroken moved across his face. "Your father would have done it just like this," he said. Quiet. Careful. Once. I had to look away so I wouldn't cry before I'd even started. He squeezed my shoulder. "After the toast, I'll ask you the check question. You take it from there." The doorbell rang. The first guests were arriving. I straightened the navy dress and went to greet my family with a smile. The party was beautiful. I'll give them that. The dining room glowed with candles, and the roses I'd arranged white and blush, their scent thick and sweet over everything. 14 people around the long table. Aunts, cousins, 2 of my grandfather's oldest friends, and Holloway nursing a club soda near the head of the table. Sloane shimmered in something expensive, playing hostess of an evening she'd bought with money meant to keep me afloat. Trent refilled wine glasses, easy and smiling, a man with no idea the floor was about to open. My mother sat at my grandfather's right hand, where she always sat. The capable daughter. The one who handled everything. And I sat near the far end with a slim folder in my lap, and roses breathing their sweetness into a room that had no idea what was coming. I made small talk. I complimented the catering. I watched my family be warm and charming and completely convinced of their own goodness. I was the only one at that table who knew we were sitting inside a crime scene dressed in candlelight. The quartet tuned softly in the corner. My grandfather caught my eye once, just once, and gave the smallest nod. Then he tapped his fork against his wine glass. The sound rang out and stopped every conversation in the room. He rose, slow and certain, the man who'd built all of this from nothing. Before we cut the cake, he said warmly, looking down the table at me, "I want to say something to my granddaughter." 14 faces lifted in the candlelight. Glasses half raised. Ready for the sweet kind of toast that ends with everyone dabbing their eyes. My grandfather looked at me and asked the question he'd asked 100 times. The one my mother had spent 4 years steering him away from at every table they shared. "How's that check treating you, sweetheart?" The table chuckled, charmed. An old man fussing lovingly over his granddaughter. My mother's smile froze like frost. Down the table, Sloane's eyes snapped to me, then to our mother, then back. Quick as a struck match. I set down my wine glass. The room waited for me to say I'm getting by. The way I always had. And I felt beneath my ribs that strange and perfect calm I knew from the worst nights in the ER, the calm that comes when there is finally nothing left to do but the right thing. "Funny you should ask, Grandpa," I said. And I reached down and opened the folder. I laid the 3 checks in the center of the table, face up, side by side, where the candlelight caught them. Pay to the order of Grace Anderson. $7,000. Pay to the order of Grace Anderson. $7,000. 3 months out of 46. My grandfather's steady handwriting on every one. The table leaned in, reading, confused. "Grandpa has been sending these," I said, and my voice came out level and clear. No tremor. No heat. 7,000 a month for almost 4 years. To help me through. One beat of silence. I never saw a single dollar. My mother's chair scraped back. "Grace, this is not the time. You're confused. Turn the check over," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The words dropped into the silence like a stone into a well. My grandfather reached down with a hand that did not shake, picked up the nearest check, and turned it over so everyone could see the back. There was my name, Grace Anderson, signed in a looping, confident hand that anyone who knew me could see at a glance was not mine. Deposited into an account that was not mine. The candlelight trembled on the paper. Somewhere down the table, an ant drew in a slow, sharp breath. My grandfather read the forged signature out loud. Slow. Every letter. Then he read the account number beneath it. Then he lifted his eyes and looked not at me, but at my sister. "Sloan." Very quietly. "Is that your account number?" The room had gone so still I could hear the candles. Sloane's face strained to the color of the tablecloth. She looked at the check. At our mother. At the 14 faces now turned toward her. She said nothing, which was somehow louder than anything she could have said. Trent set the wine bottle down on the sideboard with a small, careful click and took half a step back, the way a man does when he realizes he's standing too close to something about to go off. I looked at my sister across the candlelight, my voice flat and clean. "I didn't sign that," I said. "And a forensic examiner already knows whose hand did." Sloane exploded the way cornered people do, loud and fast, and aimed at me. "You jealous, miserable. You never wanted anything. The money was just sitting there. You think you're so noble in your scrubs? It would have rotted. We used it. We made something of it." My mother was crying now, reaching for my grandfather's sleeve. "Daddy, I was going to pay it back, every cent. I was going to lose the house. What was I supposed to do?" The words tumbled over each other, desperate, and the whole table watched a family come apart in real time. And through all of it, I stayed in my chair. I stayed quiet. I let them be loud, because their noise was doing my work for me. When there was finally a breath in it, I spoke softly. So they had to go still to hear me. "Mom," I said, "you told me you don't steal from family. You said you only borrow." A beat of rose-sweet silence. "Show me the loan papers." She had none. There was no agreement, no signature of mine, no record of a single dollar coming back, because it was never a loan, and we both knew it. "For years," I said, looking from my mother to my sister. 3 jobs. Your account. 3 small facts, laid down one at a time. Not one of them can be argued with. Then my grandfather, who had said nothing for a full minute, set down the check and stood to his full height. "Enough." His voice was rough, but it carried across every corner of that room. For 4 years, I thought my Gracie took my help and couldn't be bothered to call me. I thought she'd grown distant. I grieved that. He turned slowly toward my mother. "I have a card in my wallet I thought she wrote me." "You wrote it, didn't you, Lorraine? You wrote to me as my own granddaughter." Not a question. The silence answered it. Then Holloway, who had been a guest all evening, set down his club soda and spoke. Mild and precise. "I'd choose your next words carefully. Signing another person's name to take a negotiable instrument, and writing letters in that person's name to obtain more, can amount to forgery under Ohio law and very possibly theft by deception. This is the sort of thing a prosecutor looks at. It should be handled properly, starting now." The word forgery moved around that table like a cold draft. I looked at my mother and my sister, and I did the last thing I had planned. "I don't need an apology tonight," I said. "I've stopped needing those. What I need is the money returned and a report filed where it belongs. I closed the folder. The flowers are paid for. I'll send you the bill for those too. And I stood up, and for the first time in my life, I walked out of a family dinner with my head perfectly level. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel. That hollow ringing calm that means the hard part is over. But it wasn't finished. Not quite. Just past 11, my phone rang. Dana. Her voice had changed. The letters, Grace. There are more of them than you know. A pause. Over 4 years, someone wrote your grandfather a steady stream of notes in your name. Thank yous. Updates about a life you weren't living. Requests, including the one that raised the monthly amount to $7,000. And a more recent letter asking him to advance 6 months at once for a nurse practitioner program you were never enrolled in. I closed my eyes. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a 4-year operation running on my name and an old man's love designed to keep the money flowing, growing, and to keep me drowning quietly so I would never look up and ask. The checks, a sympathetic person might call a family mess. The letters were the part no one could explain away. They showed intent. They showed escalation. And they were all on paper now, with my grandfather's authorization on top. What happens now? I said. Now, Dana said gently, it stops being something they can settle around a kitchen table. It didn't resolve overnight, and it wasn't clean. But it was real and measurable, which is all I'd ever wanted. The forensic accounting put the total near $278,000. A restitution agreement was reached, secured against my mother's house and what remained of Sloane's business. The criminal report moved forward with the forged letters in the file. Forgery and theft by deception were not words a prosecutor waved off, and both my mother and sister faced an investigation that is, as I tell you this, still ongoing. Trent was happy to cooperate the moment his own name appeared on the paperwork. My grandfather changed his arrangements that same week. The money came directly to me now, no one in between. And the first thing he did with the rest was establish a nursing scholarship in my father's name, because he said his son-in-law would have preferred that to a watch. I dropped the weekend agency job. I kept teaching the CNA class because I wanted to, not because I had to. And for the first time in 7 years, I slept the whole night through, woke up before my alarm, and didn't reach for my phone to count what was left. I don't speak to my mother or my sister directly anymore. Not out of hatred, and not to punish them, but because everything between us now runs through lawyers and restitution schedules, and that distance is the only thing that finally lets me breathe. I didn't cut them off. I cut off their access to my name, my silence, and my money, which is a different thing entirely. On my own refrigerator, I've taped a photocopy of one canceled check, face up on one side, and on the other, the forged signature staring out at my kitchen every morning. Not to stay angry. To stay clear. Because protecting what is yours isn't revenge. It isn't cruelty. It isn't a betrayal of the family that betrayed you first. It's the rent you pay to finally live in peace. That's my story. For years of silence. 3 jobs. 1 check, turned over at the right table. If this reminded you of a question you've been too polite to ask about money, about who insists on handling things in your family, about whose name keeps appearing where it shouldn't, take that as your sign. Ask it. And if someone you love needs to hear this tonight, share it with them. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.